Tuesday, January 30th. This is the regular meeting, Board of Selectmen, 7 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all. I am to read that we are being broadcast live through the Whitman Hanson Cable Access Channel in front of a live studio audience. How's that sound, right? Okay. Public announcements. The treasurer collector would like to remind residents that tax bills are due on Thursday, February 1st. You can pay online at www.hanson-ma.gov, in person, or use the drop box in front of Town Hall. Open burning season began January 15th and will run until April 30th. Permits will be available at Fire Headquarters, 505 Liberty Street, daily from 9 to 5. The cost of a permit is $20 payable by check or money order, made out to the Town of Hanson. No cash will be accepted. Nomination papers for the May 19th town election are now available at the Hanson Town Clerk's office. For more information, contact the Town Clerk at 781-293-2772. All voters and residents who have not returned their 2018 census form are urged to do so by the Town Clerk. Any voter that has not returned their 2018 town census form will be placed on the inactive voter list for future elections. The Hanson Library has teamed up with the Boston Bruins to participate in their annual pajama drive to benefit the Department of Children and Families and Cradles to Crayons. From February 1st through March 15th, the Hanson Library will be accepting donations of new pairs of pajamas for babies, children, and teens. There will be a special town meeting on Monday, February 5th at 7:30 p.m. at the Hanson Middle School. A quorum of 100 registered voters is required to conduct the meeting, so please, folks, mark that on your calendar and make sure you attend. The Hanson Business Network will be hosting a St. Patrick's Day fundraiser at Camp Kewanee on Saturday, March 17th from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. 100% of the proceeds from this event will be donated to the the Hanson Food Pantry. This event will be a St. Patrick's themed shindig, complete with boiled dinner and all the condiments, coffee and dessert, live Irish music, DJ'd Irish music, an Irish step dance performing. Wow, that's pretty good, Irish step, huh? A silent auction, raffles, and a St. Patrick's Day photo booth. Tickets are $25 per person, but we are offering tickets for $20 each if you contact us at 781-294-1261 before February 17th, 2018. If you would like to support this event but cannot attend, we're accepting donations for our raffle and silent auction. For information, please check out the Hanson Business Network's Facebook page. That's it, I guess, right? And then volunteers are needed on the following committees: 200th Anniversary, Agricultural, Capital Improvement, Community Preservation Commission, Disabilities, Elder Affairs, Energy, Finance, Memorial Day Observance, Nathaniel Thomas Mill Committees, and Recreation Commission. Applications for appointment and information on the committee is available on the town website at www.hanson-ma.gov. Upcoming meetings: Parks and Fields will be held their meeting on Thursday, February 1st at 7 p.m. at the Fire Department. Selectmen's meeting will be Monday, February 5th, 7 p.m. at the Hanson Middle School. Special town meeting will be Monday, February 5th, 7:30 p.m. at the Hanson Middle School. The FinCom has a meeting Tuesday, February 6th. I don't have a time frame on this.
That'll be 7 o'clock.
Would it be 7 o'clock? Okay. Selectmen's meeting, I'm going to try to read all the Selectmen's meeting, will be also February 7th at the school. Oh, this is to address the school budget at the high school, 7 p.m. And the Selectmen's meeting will also be held on Tuesday, February 13th, and Tuesday, February 27th, both at 7 p.m. There will be a school committee meeting on Wednesday, February 7th at 7 p.m. And the Historical Commission will be holding their meeting on Tuesday, February 13th at 6 p.m. And that concludes public announcements and upcoming meetings. Move on to the next item of our agenda is the fiscal year 2019 budget preview, and I think we have Todd with us tonight, right, Todd? How you doing?
Good evening.
You should have on your iPads item 1, but also a printout copy of the sources and uses for the fiscal year 2019 budget. Todd, did you want to take us in on the key items?
Yes, thank you. So tonight, in accordance with the town's bylaw, the administration is presenting you with our initial recommended budget for FY19 for the operation of the town for the next fiscal year. There are a number of items that are still in play, as you can well imagine, not the least of which is the state budget and state aid we might expect, as well as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that the Regional School Committee has not voted on their operating assessment or budget yet. So it will be showing you a sort of a placeholder, if you will, at this time. So what I'm going to mainly talk to is, as you said, is this first exhibit. It's a single page called Sources and Uses. And there are 4 columns, so we're providing for the board a little bit of history here. The full final budgets for FY16 and 17, what we're calling the original budget for FY18, which is at the point that we set the tax rate in late November. And as you know, we have a town meeting next week, and we will likely have a special in May. So this year's budget still could be amended or altered, or we may have transfers. So that's why we're referring to 18 as the original budget, a little different than the prior years. Those were final budgets, fully loaded, including all special town meeting actions. The far right column is what I'm going to review with you tonight, and this is our preliminary thoughts in terms of sources and uses of funds to cover both our operating and our capital needs that may be presented to town meeting in May. And if you look to the very bottom of the column, you'll notice right out of the gate at your level, we're presenting what could be considered a balanced budget, a budget that we can recommend and we believe we can fund. Now, a lot of things may change between now and May, some favorable, some otherwise, so we'll keep you informed as things progress and as we work through the details with the Finance Committee and the various boards and departments. But sort of taking it from the top, so the top is where we're sort of identifying what's available to fund budgets and capital. The first section represents our property taxes. And we have a starting point of $19.2 million, which is our FY18 levy limit. We're allowed, as you know, under state law to add 2.5% to that existing levy limit, which for us is $481,000. And then any new construction that might occur since the last time the tax rate was set, we're allowed to, this would be for either new taxpayers, new construction or additions and major improvements. We've have a preliminary estimate of about $250,000 of additional tax revenue that would be yielded from what we refer to as new growth or new construction.
Is that a conservative estimate? Because it's usually...
At this time, the last few years, we've done quite well, but we're at the tail end of some projects, and building permit activity has definitely sort of leveled. So I would say, in answer to your question, this is still a conservative number.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Sure.
So how do we get that number?
We work through building permits with the assessing office primarily. And
Okay, and so what about like planning, who may know what's in the hopper and what's about to, are they part of that dialogue too, or?
Generally not. I mean, what's in the hopper for them is likely a building permit next year and tax
Okay.
revenue. You know, it's usually about an 18-month. But there are occasions where a project is fast-tracked. But generally, we would look at building permits and see what's under construction and what we can capture between now and June 30th.
Okay, thank you.
It's a logical way to do it, too.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And we modify this as we go through the process, as we get closer to town meeting. In addition, the voters over the years have voted a few projects that the voters have said they were willing to pay additional taxes that we've issued debt for. In our case, with the town, it would be the police station. So we have, the voters agreed to pay the principal and interest annual payments until the station is paid off, which I believe is in 2026. So we still have, what's that, eight or 9 years left to pay off this police station, at which point that amount, which is about a little over $350,000, will go away and no longer be raised through taxes. Additionally, the regional high school was voted by both communities, and we're getting down there. I think there's only about $6.5 million left of overall debt on the high school, so I don't recall which year this fully matures, but as you see, it goes down a bit each year as we're paying off the principal. So about $313,000 has been voted to pay for the debt associated with the building of the high school. And then there were some technology improvements approved a few years ago by town meeting for the regional schools. Whitman was in a position where they could pay cash for it. We had opted at the time to ask them to finance it over 5 years. So this will be maturing. The last year of payment will be 2021. So we have 3 fiscal years, the upcoming one and 2 more, to pay off that school technology. So that gives us an amount of nearly $20.8 million in property taxes that could be levied to cover various operating expenses of the town. Last week, the governor, you saw the state of the state, and he did issue his preliminary budget with recommendations for state aid to cities and towns and districts. We are seeing about a $39,000 increase, very modest increase to our local aid. Many of the lines are relatively flat. Our unrestricted aid represents most of this increase, and we are experiencing a decrease in veterans' benefits reimbursements, and that's because there's a direct correlation with how much we give out in benefits. We're reimbursed a year later, 75 cents on the dollar. So as the caseload has diminished for veterans, that's good. We're able to lower the veterans' budget a little bit, but we also have a loss of some state reimbursement because there's a year lag.
Okay.
So, but again, at this point, based on what the governor has released, we're expecting just over $1.5 million in state aid. And I'll just remind you that unlike some of our surrounding communities that are not part of a regional school district, you might hear them talk about a much larger state aid number, but that's because their Chapter 70 school aid is part of the city or town's state aid. In our case, that goes to the region, and
Goes to
then
the district. Yeah.
that's right, to the district, and then the 2 towns are assessed a net amount, net of state aid. In addition to property taxes and state aid, the third large source of funds we have is what we refer to as local receipts, and this is primarily the big item here would be our motor vehicle excise tax. It also includes penalties and interest on delinquent taxes, investment earnings, licenses, permits, fees, fines, all sorts of departmental, a variety of sources that we take in locally from our various town departments.
And Todd, you get that from the treasurer's office, is that right, or no?
The motor excise comes from the registry of
Treasurer.
motor vehicles.
Okay.
And what we do is we do an analysis annually as part of the tax rate setting process. We have to defend what our estimates are, that we're confident we're not going to create a deficit, and
Okay.
that we can substantially bring in those funds. So we're actually projecting, I want to say, about a 7% increase in this. We've had a couple of pretty good years. So we're confident this is a number that we can meet or beat. And that sort of brings us to the major, subtotal of just over 24.1 million of revenue. So this is all revenue. Property taxes, state aid, and local aid, local receipts, or about a 4% increase over the current year that we're in. We have additional sources of funds that we use from time to time. Some of them are not recurring, so we try to use those toward non-recurring purposes, such as our capital plan. As you know, we had a very good year at the end of 17 as far as our free cash. It was about 400,000 higher than what we were typically used to, and the timing's actually very good for us, given the town meeting coming up next week. So this is going to allow us to not have to finance, but to pay for the costs associated with closing that this district has in terms of closing the McQuon. So we'll be asking town meeting Monday night to consider funding that through use of existing free cash. And then we're required to spend appropriate a minimum of 1% of our overall budget toward capital, which in our case, for conversation purposes, is probably a little less than 300,000. We're proposing that there are a number of capital needs that the capital committee will be considering, and so we're in a position where we could devote a little over $500,000 of our free cash toward the capital plan, should those projects and acquisitions rise to the point of being approved. If we get much beyond that, we'd have to be looking at, for larger projects, considering some sort of longer financing or bonding.
I have a question. Todd,
Yes.
what's free cash operating?
So this is, it's not a good pattern to get into, but occasionally we have a need in a budget. It might be mid-year, and we have to supplement that budget. The tax rate may already have been set. We need to supplement that budget through the use of free cash. Often, as you know, we try to just transfer from other lines where we know we might have a favorable balance. But as you see in FY17, we did have a couple of items that we did fund for about $47,000. I like to separate them because it's not, free cash isn't something you can count on every year like the tax levy.
Right.
It always goes up 2.5%. Free cash can go down substantially year to year or go up. So I just tried to separate it for your purposes. There are communities that rely on it to support their operating budgets, and then they get in trouble some years when free cash isn't as robust as they might like. The assessors have what we refer to as overlay, which is a provision for statutory exemptions and abatements on property values, where a property owner might question the value and ask them to review it, in which case it might result in what's referred to as an abatement or a reduction of tax. So we make an allowance for that annually. And now under the Municipal Modernization Act, prior to that act, we had to keep these in separate levy year buckets, if you will. Now we're allowed, cities and towns are allowed to commingle. So if we had a good year and then maybe a tight year, and the tight year needed more abatements and the funds weren't there, we can now utilize the entire pool. And when the pool is excessive, the Board of Assessors can vote to release some of that, and then it becomes a source of funds that town meeting can use, like free cash, to appropriate for various purposes. Here, we're recommending what we've been doing in recent years, which is asking the board to release a modest amount to cover the cost of pursuing tax title for delinquent property taxes. So it is sort of still related to property tax, but it helps us with legal costs, advertising associated with leaning property for delinquent property taxes. Ambulance fees, they come in and we reserve them, and we utilize those funds to purchase replacement ambulances, to pay for medical supplies, to cover a portion of the fire department's operating budget. What we're proposing here is to utilize $300,000 to offset the cost of the fire department budget for FY19. Back 2 years ago, you'll notice the number was quite a bit more, and that was a year where we replaced an ambulance. So we do, the account does grow some years, but the idea is we're planning for equipment replacement, and that way there's no impact to the taxpayers and no spike, if you will. Lastly, in this sort of other sources of funds that we have available, we have some debt that's been issued for the purpose of septic loans to homeowners for Title V. And as the homeowners pay the betterments back, we reserve those funds and ask town meeting to appropriate them to pay back the debt. When there's excess funds, then the Board of Health has funds to reloan those amounts over and above what would cover the debt. And again, this is so the taxpayers, the rest of the taxpayers are not covering the cost of the debt for that particular specific home improvement. So that's about $128,000 to cover those septic loan payments that will be part of our debt budget that you'll see. So there's nearly $1 million that we're recommending of other sources, non-revenue, if you will, but sources of funds to help us balance and pay for certain, mainly capital, but certain operating costs as well. The next group of accounts reference things that, some of which do not go through town meeting, but we still are required to pay for. I mentioned the assessor's provision for abatements and exemptions, which is referred to as the overlay. So we're looking at setting aside $150,000 out of next year's tax levy to offset statutory exemptions and abatements. And just to give you some context on that, the exemptions that the assessors approve, statutory exemptions, which are things for like veterans, surviving spouses, blind individuals. There are a number of categories. They typically annually issue in excess of $100,000 of exemptions. So we're not asking to set aside much to cover abatements for property that may be valued or may need a modification to their value. And again, this is because now we can pool the prior year balances. We don't need to raise as much. As you can see, we were raising around $275 a year just a few years ago, and now we've got it down to $150. So that allows us to have more resources to fund our operating budget. There are cherry sheet offsets, which are, we not only get state aid, but we get state assessments and state charges. And as part of our state revenue, estimated revenue, we also get a modest amount that's dedicated specifically to the public library. So what you're seeing here, this $13,205, you'll see it on the cherry sheet for Hanson, but it cannot be used for the general funding of the general fund budget. It's going to go specifically to the public library for the use of the trustees to support the library, in like a revolving fund, if you will. The next line is very timely, given the weather earlier today. We've been trying to start to modify the snow budget, as you know, a little bit as we can each year,
Sure.
to get it to a point where it's maybe at a point where it's like an average winter cost for us. We're still not there, but and we try to fund some of it in May, cover some of the overage. Certain years, of course, 15 is off this chart, but you'll recall 15 was a big year for us. Our shortfall was in the neighborhood of 900,000, if I remember right. We were able to fund some of it, and then we had to raise the rest. But any deficit that we come out of this year with for snow removal has to be added to the tax levy in the fall. So at this point, I'm estimating that we may need $200,000 to cover that. Last year, it was just under 210. The year before was 272, and 239 back in FY16. So this is the lowest of what you're seeing, and but again, this will modify as we go through the winter.
So Jay, you can't make that number any bigger?
Yes, we can make it bigger. Yeah. We are assuming that in May, there will still be some free cash available to fund a portion of the shortfall, and that, this would be sort of what we're not able to cover, if you will.
Okay.
But if the rest of the winter is mild, we may be in really good shape and not even need to access this, which would allow us to put some of or all of this back into another budget. Or choose not to spend it. We don't have to spend everything that's available. That's, but we've just been pressed in recent years, given the, modest amount of increase we've had to revenue versus the demand for services.
So this is your estimate of shortfall.
This is the shortfall, yeah, and I don't have a crystal ball, so
I
it's,
understand.
but it's a placeholder, if you will. And as we work our way through the winter, I'll modify this up or down depending on how things go. But again, this is the lowest amount we would be raising in recent year, in the last probably 5 years anyway. I do have a 10-year chart, and I didn't bring it with me. And then cherry sheet charges, this is the state assessments for state and county charges. So not only does the state give us aid, they also assess us for certain services, things like the MBTA, mosquito control, Plymouth County, a portion of supporting the Plymouth County for the county charges. And there are planning, area planning councils. So that's about $155,000 based on the governor's proposed budget. And this consistently typically goes up around 2.5% overall.
Do they take that right off the top, or you
Yes.
actually got to check?
No, they actually take it off the top. Yep, monthly.
It's the only way they nail
Make
it.
sure they
1/10
get
a
this.
month. They take
Only way to
1/10
make
a
sure they
month,
get it, yeah.
or 1/12, if you will. Yeah, every month. We also typically have raise a modest amount for tax title for the legal costs associated with delinquent taxes and properly leaning those parcels. And again, that does not have to go through town meeting. That can just be part of the tax rate setting process. We've targeted that at $20,000. It used to be $30,000, but our collections have been good in recent years, and so we've moderated this down a bit. If we get to a point, closer to May and we find we don't need this, or even before we set the tax rate in the fall, we can choose to not add this on if something else happens. We've also historically provided what we would call a tax subsidy or a general fund subsidy to two of our enterprise funds, the solid waste or transfer station fund. We're proposing to level fund that subsidy for next year. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but this program is challenged financially. The Finance Committee is fairly strong about this particular subsidy, and they would like to see it decline each year, as I'm sure we all would. But the best we can really propose to the board at this time is to level fund that subsidy, even at which we'll probably be using their equity to the tune of at least $65,000, if not a little more, to fund next year's operating budget. So that will work for the short term, but it's going to create a financial problem for us in a couple of years. The recreation program, we've typically provided a $30,000 to $40,000 subsidy.
I'm
for ma-
sorry, Todd.
I'm sorry.
If we know that it's gonna cause a problem for us in a couple of years, then why are we taking that approach? Because we're getting pushed by FinCom to do that? I'm just,
The Finance Committee, the Finance Committee is very strong about their view. I don't want to speak for them, but their view is these enterprise funds should be self-supporting.
okay, Matt, have you had an opportunity to speak to FinCom?
After this.
We're going tonight
Oh,
to
okay,
chat
all
with
right.
them.
Because
Yep.
I'm just wondering, because I know Matt's come and spoken to us,
Sure,
and he's made a very compelling argument that there's things that are beyond his control that, you know. So I'm, okay, maybe
this
this will be
is just a
tweaked
starting
at-
point. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, after
Absolutely, yeah.
FinCom.
After further discussion, it may
Okay.
be tweaked. But, you know, based on what you've heard from Matt, clearly this program needs a good hard look.
Yes.
And
Yep.
it's got to be changed in some way, or it's not sustainable, financially sustainable.
Understood.
Okay. Recreation, we've historically provided a modest subsidy, 30 to 40,000 a year. That went away this year, and we're proposing no subsidy for next year. Their budget, as you'll see, is up a bit more than most. It will be a little challenging to make sure their revenue is able to cover what they're looking to ask the town to appropriate. But again, that's something we'll work through over the winter and early spring. So that brings us down to a number that's sort of the net amount available for operating budgets and capital items, capital purchases. And that gives us just under $24.5 million available as total sort of net sources available for appropriation by town meeting. The bottom little section just gives you high level what we're looking at for the major functional areas of our budget: general government, public safety, public works, education, and so on, and our fixed costs, which include insurance, employee benefits, and debt service costs. And then below that, we've got what I'm referring to as articles non-capital, and that's right now just $20,000 for tax title to be funded from the overlay surplus up above. $635,000 of capital spending. And you'll notice we've got $535 referenced up above to come from free cash. So for a capital plan of over $600,000, we're only using $100,000 of recurring revenue. So we still have a long way to go to really fold in a good, capital maintenance plan here just to be able to afford it. We had a good year with free cash, so this is going to help us take care of some of our needs. But ultimately, we want to be able to work this into that some recurring revenue is used for things like road repair and routine equipment replacement.
Todd,
Sure.
what is under the umbrella of public safety versus public works? I mean, I know the obvious, fire, I assume
Sure.
fire and police.
Yep.
Is that all that's in public safety?
No, and in the subsequent 3 pages, if you have the hard copy,
Yep,
I actually list out in the format that you see at town meeting.
gotcha, okay.
So on the second of those 3 pages would be public safety. And you're right, the 2 big ones are police and fire. We also have communications or dispatch. All the inspectors, the inspection department, animal control, and the tree warden. Public works we have a very modest amount for engineering, which we're hoping will be supported. And then highway, snow and ice, street lights, sweeping, town fuel make up what's called public works. Also, the water obviously is a public work, but we vote that separately.
That was really where I was going
Okay,
with that, but I
sure.
thought that was probably kind of in its own
It
swim
is,
lane, if you
because
will. Yeah.
water is self-funding through the rates.
Okay,
That's
great.
right. So they're able to, they've got a captive set of users, unlike solid waste. And so they're able to recover their costs through their revenues. Lastly, on the first page is just a recommendation to continue to do modest funding into our 2 stabilization funds.
Okay.
And this is suggesting we slightly ramp up
50?
to the 50,000 represents 30,000. Our thinking is 30,000 to our general stabilization, which we typically have been doing at 25,
Yeah,
and 20,000 to our school stabilization, which we've typically been doing at 10,000.
yeah.
So, but we have a tremendous amount of capital needs in the schools, as you're well aware of. So we thought, it was a chance to start to maybe, just in a small way, ramp this up a little bit so that we can start to set aside funds. So when something happens and we need to replace a boiler or something happens at one of the schools, that maybe we'll have at least a portion of the funds available to cover those capital needs.
So Todd, quick question on
Sure.
on the 20,000 of the school stabilization. Did you consider the McQuon School closing too, or no?
No.
Okay.
This is just looking at their overall capital.
Understood.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
just wanted to know.
Yep.
Not under the 535, is it?
So
I want to know.
So this, again,
10 to 20.
this will change between now and town meeting in many lines, I'm sure. But at this point, we're at a place where we can suggest that the budget is fundable and balanced, and we'll work through things. This does not include much in the way of staffing changes.
Yeah.
I know we've had a few, 2 or 3 requests for additional staffings, so if that happens, that affects the benefits budget plus the salaries, and we'll have to, see what we can do to move things around to make that happen if we need to. This does fully fund the deputy fire chief, which we only half funded, if you will, this year. It was a mid-year start. But how we were able to do that and fully fund it for next year is that this year, when we set the tax rate, if you go back to the first grouping, unused levy, just before the net tax levy, you'll see we left $44,500 on the table with this year's tax levy. So we started 19 using 18's unused tax levy to fund the balance of the deputy without impacting other operating budgets. So this was an opportunity at the right time, and we were able to finesse the financing of it, if you will. On the subsequent 3 pages, we go through, again, you have your binders, which have detailed line items, but this sort of gives you at a high level what the departments, what we're recommending for various departments, salaries, expenses, in a few cases, some modest capital outlay, which are things that fall below the capital committee's threshold, which is mainly police and fire. I've taken a first pass in the far right column to suggest how those would be funded, so you can start to see some of those other sources of funds where they would fit in, whether it's the Title V funds to cover the septic loans, or the ambulance fund to cover a portion of the fire operation, and
Even the salaries.
and so on. Yes. Yeah, for callbacks and, yeah, exactly. And so for the general fund, which is all of our operating budgets except for water, recreation, and solid waste, we're recommending a budget of 3.95% above the current funding level. And I should point out to the board that, as you know, the school district hasn't voted on their budget yet.
Right.
So we've put up on the page 2 of the 3-page, toward the bottom half, you'll see a section called education. So we have 3 school districts that we pay assessments to. Of course, Whitman Hanson for most of our students, South Shore Regional Vocational Technical School, which is about $1 million. And then the Norfolk Agricultural School. We've actually got some students graduating, and we've actually got a favorable if you will, drop in enrollment at the Aggie school. So those funds are able to be folded into helping the local district a bit more by about 100,000. So we've got a placeholder in here at 8.7 million, our share of the net assessment to run the region for next year. So this represents for us an increase of just over nearly 6.2%.
That's what we review next week with them, right?
Yep. And I do know that, we look at enrollment annually, and our share of the enrollment has dropped again a little bit as compared to Whitman's, as you may know. So our starting point is sort of favorable for us. And these can turn around over time, but right now, I think it's about a $60,000, if I remember right, favorable for us adjustment. So we're offering X 100,000 of increase here, plus the 60, if you will.
What's the percentage again, Todd?
It's this for us, budget to budget, 6.2.
Okay.
But you can really add about 60,000 to this difference, which will be closer to, 6.5%, 7%. I'm sure when it's all said and done. Again, it's a placeholder, and we'll work with what they vote next week and see how things go. And as I said, in terms of the self-supporting funds, water, the one thing I want to point out to the board on the water budget, which is toward the bottom of the final page, you'll notice what's referred to as indirect costs is up quite a bit. What we're doing here for the first time is we're assessing the water department their share of the pension obligation to Plymouth County, which is about 5% of the overall town annual obligation to Plymouth County. So Plymouth County in the general fund is 1.4 million, and I think the water department's share is 75 or 6,000 from memory. So that's most of the increase relates to a new, they're going to pay their share of the pension assessment.
So you're saying this is the first time that we've done that?
Yes.
And,
How come they didn't do it?
yeah, and is there any way to retroactively go and get that money?
No.
Okay.
No. And certainly as we talk more in the future about funding our post-employment benefit obligations beyond pensions for primarily health care, we'll be looking, to share that as well as we set funds aside for future benefit costs.
Did you come up with that, Todd?
Actually, it was in conjunction with our audit firm.
Oh.
Yeah, we did like an analysis for them, and then they, and we kind of put our heads together and said, gosh, this is fair.
Yeah,
More
absolutely
fair
fair.
to the community. And the other thing I'd just point out in the water department is you'll notice the debt service line has been increasing. It's more than doubled in the last 4 years, and that's because of the tank and the water main improvements and some of the capital projects that had been sort of deferred for quite a while. We're now, developing a financial plan for the water department where these can be funded through rates without, any major changes to rates. But that's really where their operating budget is changing for next year. It's debt payments and the pension assessment, their share. Recreation, again, as I mentioned earlier, they've requested a bit of an increase to their budget. It's defensible. It makes sense to us. We're just not sure it can all be funded through program revenue. There's a new line you'll see labeled debt service. This is for the new septic system. And the plan is to finance this over 5 years. So it's $50,000 a year plus interest. And we're recommending that come from their retained earnings. So that program revenue won't be supporting this. Hopefully we'll be able to pay for the debt over the next few years with their retained earnings and not impact program. you should know that that project is going to be slightly over budget, and at the special in May, we'll be asking for a supplement to that. I want to say it's in the neighborhood of 25,000, but I don't know that we have a final number from the engineer yet. And then the solid waste program, you've talked with Matt before. We're recommending using 64,000 of their retained earnings, which is about 196,000. So that could, at that level, they could sustain this for maybe 3 years at most, depending on how the costs rise. But this program really needs, this is probably, of anything, if I had to suggest to the board, where do we need to do some work, I would say the solid waste program.
Up at the transfer station.
To the transfer station, yep. Certainly, we've got to look longer term at employee benefits and how we deal with our pension and healthcare obligations and start to set a little more funds aside for that. We're really not doing much in that area either, but we're doing what we can. And I think we've given the capital committee some funds to get some things done this year that may not recur next year. And anyway, this is sort of a starting point for the finance committee and other town officials to get rolling. And I'm pleased, at least out of the gate, it's potentially balanced. So it's workable. So
On the expenses for solid waste,
sure.
SW program revenue, is that what we just said?
Yes.
That's the 195.
So that's
right?
that's the bag and tag
Because
fees.
the recyclables going up in the cost of what they have,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Gotcha.
And so we had talked, that we know we need to work with Matt and talk again about this, about
Yeah.
this. So we know that that's on the docket at least some point in the future as a board looking at that. But what about the other, the pension and the health that you're saying that we need to address? How would we go about doing that if we want to be, I don't want to say proactive because you've
Sure.
identified it as a need, so we're really being reactive, but.
Right. Well, I think what I would suggest is later in the spring, early summer, we're going to have an actuary come in and do an update to the valuations, which we're required to do every 2 years, and this is the year. What I would suggest is that we have him, he can actually speak in layman's terms, not in actuary. And I would suggest we have him come in and speak to all of us and present his report, but sort of talk about what options we might have and what it looks like going forward. So I think the board could sort of put that on the short back burner until, maybe June or.
Okay,
So
great.
after that assessment, okay.
But we'll plan to have him, schedule him to meet with the board.
We know it means more money to be paid
Right.
into it, but the question is how and what options we have.
Right, and then we have other, as you know, capital projects on the horizon that are more significant than what we currently have on the books, things like perhaps a new highway garage. So we've also got to sort of look at a lot of our debt structure right now. Most of our debt is paid for through voter-approved debt exclusions. The water department is paying for all of theirs through rates. The septic loans the betterments are paying for the septic-related debt. And essentially, we don't have a lot of other debt. The police station will drop off in 2026. So as that drops off, that gives us an opportunity to take on new debt, but it's not substantial. So that's something else we've got to do some planning with, I think, so that we're able to deal with these projects.
When did the town hall fall off? 'Cause that was on
Just a
there
year ago, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was just 1 or 2 years ago. Yeah. Yep. And that was about 120,000 a year. And so what we're doing is we're financing the Plymouth County Hospital cleanup over a 3 or 4 year period. So that's a short window. So when that drops, it'll be just before the police, but we might be able to sort of, work with those two to do a large project or two without impacting operations or
Yeah,
taxes.
that'd be great.
So,
Taxes is a big.
yeah,
deal.
exactly.
Yep.
So,
I think it looks great.
So I think we're in good financial health,
Yeah,
right?
especially
Overall,
if you get it so
we-
early
Budget
too.
so fast,
compared to
yeah.
some, we are, you're right.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Further questions?
No, as usual, an excellent job and very thorough. Yep.
Thank you, Todd.
I
very
have
much.
one question.
Of course.
Unemployment compensation,
Yes.
it's up like $18,000 from last year. Just curious.
Yeah, so what we do is we budget for one person to go full-term, collect. I should first say that the town does not pay a percentage of payroll tax like many businesses do,
Yes.
have to. We're a pay-as-you-go, or if,
Okay.
or cost. Only when there's a claim do we reimburse the state. So we have a firm that monitors the claims and advises on it for a very modest fee per year. I think it's under 2,000 a year, 1,800 or.
Yeah.
It's actually in your budget book. And then the difference is the assumption that we'll have one claim that goes full-term.
Okay,
But we've been able to manage the claims in recent years, and we haven't had layoffs
yeah.
or any,
Stafford.
we had a small claim last year, but that's why you see such a difference.
From 16 and 17.
If it was a
especially.
percentage of payroll, as you know, it would be a pretty big number,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
so. But those years where we all had layoffs, that line was tough. You know, it could be a couple 100,000.
Does the
Back-
town
back in
pay
the
dollar
day.
for dollar if
Yes,
somebody's on?
Dollar
Did it
for
really?
dollar, yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So, in good times, this is great. You know, when, in times where you've got to do layoffs, it's tough for cities and towns.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a base in the budget to begin with, and suddenly you have this spike of
Huge number,
expense,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, you get to the point where it doesn't make sense to lay somebody off.
Right.
And lose their services
Yeah.
and still basically be
That's right.
paying almost the same amount. It's-
Right.
It's really a difficult situation.
Todd, thank you
Thank you.
again, very much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask at this point if the board would consider making a motion to accept this preliminary fiscal 19 budget. I think it's also important for me to state how invaluable Todd's assistance or Todd's work on the budget has been this year and has been in previous years, and that I am greatly in debt to all the work that he does. In all the towns in which I've worked, I've never had the pleasure to have a resource like Todd. He takes an awful lot off of what I used to do in other towns. And very quickly, in my service here in the town of Hanson, I came to realize that I didn't have to worry about the work that I found myself not doing because of Todd and because of his expertise. So I think it's very important. And I think the board realizes that, but I wanted to make that statement as well. So that being said, if the board would entertain accepting this preliminary budget.
Donnie,
So
moved.
Go ahead.
Second.
seconded by Mr. Mitchell. Again, balanced budget, big deal. Thank you very much, absolutely. Let's take a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. 5-0 to accept preliminary budget. Thank you very much again, Todd.
Mike, are you saying we should find more stuff for you to do?
It allows me to do different things.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to go there.
So next item we have on our agenda is the opening of the May 2018 special and annual town meeting warrants. And I think we would entertain a motion to open both those warrants as for May 2018.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Why don't we put it to vote, and then we'll move into discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye, 5-0. Discussion is, Mike, Article 2, right?
Well, yeah, and actually, Article 2 is not related to the motion that was just made. It's actually, Article 2 is in relationship to the special town meeting,
Special town.
which is occurring a week from yesterday. And Matt has put some figures together. It's the only pending article on that warrant that the Board of Selectmen has not recommended yet. Matt has done an awful lot of work in crunching the numbers. And as I had mentioned, after this presentation, the three of us are probably going to have to go upstairs and speak with the selectmen, the FinCom on this very subject.
So basically, it should have said the opening of the May 2018 annual town meeting warrant and the special February,
No.
no?
What it says is we're only opening the main.
So we moved and seconded that, and do we need to vote?
And you voted. What you just did was open the May
The May town meeting.
special and annual town meeting
Right.
warrants, which we
Which-
ordinarily would do the first meeting in January,
Right,
but I didn't want to cause confusion. I
That
mean, you
makes
guys are confused.
because of the February meeting.
Because of the
Yeah, I gotcha.
February one.
Okay, I'm with
So I
you.
wanted to be close enough to February and open it. This,
So that's it for new
this
business.
allows everybody to start submitting articles to me. They should be.
To input for them, yep.
Yeah.
Right, they should be to our office by the 16th of March, and then the Board of Selectmen will vote to close it on the 19th of March.
Okay.
Just to make it clear, too, you're opening up a special that will occur in May as opposed to the special that occurs a week from now.
In February.
And typically, the town of Hanson has a special town meeting prior to the annual town meeting, literally half an hour or so before the annual town meeting, to take care of anything in the current fiscal year that needs to be addressed.
Well, conducted on the same day.
Yeah, it's same day, same night.
Gotcha.
Good,
Okay.
thank you for the clarification.
Sorry. Yeah, that makes sense. So so we've opened it, and that's all we needed to do, correct?
Yes.
That's it. Moving on to old business, we have a February town meeting, review the articles. You should have that on item 3 on your iPads. So these are the items that we're gonna be voting for on February 5th at 7:30 PM at the Hanson Middle School. The, Article 1 is,
And
of
again,
course,
Mr. Chairman, I hate to interrupt. The only thing that really needs to be addressed at this point is Article 2, as we just mentioned.
is the Article 2 item.
Yeah, and Matt will address the numbers that he's come up
Because we
with.
didn't have numbers.
At which time we'll ask the Board of Selectmen, you've already voted to place it, we'll ask you to recommend.
And Mike, you did forward to the board, though, the details of Article 1, just for the, that's what I was going with, so. So we have a bullet list of Article 1 on the school stuff. So let's move to Article 2. Matt, would you come up and speak? Just tell us your name and,
Dennis, the health agent. Last time we'd spoken a couple weeks ago,
a couple
I
weeks, yeah.
only had a very short amount of time to get a rough number together earlier that day. So, for the past couple weeks, looked more into all the lines that we either needed more money in to cover expenses we've already paid and what we'll need to get us through till July 1st. There was an error. I said that I thought we were going to need some additional money to fund the indirect costs, which is the employee benefits.
Mhm.
There was actually an error on mine. We had taken some money out of that line to pay bills that we didn't have enough money in already. So we actually did budget enough, so that's
It's good.
not needed for the indirect costs.
What's gonna be the total amount of the Article 2?
It's going to be
$41,000, right?
$69.
That's the details that we have here, I'm sorry,
correct.
right? I'm just saying, for the loudness, to the people in the
Yep.
audience. 869, good. And you gave us a detailed description of each item, right?
As best I can. The first one, it seems a little vague. It encompasses a lot. It's basically the transportation costs we have to pay to ABC, who does the hauling for us, as well as New Bedford Waste. It's all in one, but the disposal of our solid waste and also to Waste Zero.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly I know I had said that I had owed some money, or I needed some money for Waste Zero. When the pay-as-you-throw program was set up, a lot of towns will do it. The money the town would pay to Waste Zero to pay for the bags and the service would come out of what's reimbursed to the town for what they make, and that's the program.
Right.
I guess the way it was set up here in Hanson was we get everything and then we have to pay Waste Zero back.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a deficit there. So it's a little vague, but it's just that the disposal costs and transportation costs have exceeded what was budgeted. The big item is the next one. It's for the single stream recycling, the disposal, that's what we got hit with in November 1st at $65.98 a ton. Had some talks with the DEP. We did get some grant money this year. It's about $9,000. I need some of that to fund some other things I need at the transfer station. The DEP is allowing us to offset some of our recycling costs because it's a burden to the town. With that grant money, the town has to pay the first $50 per ton. The grant money can subsidize the difference. So that number actually went down a little bit. And I did the math and wrote it all up in that description for you. Again, that money will be dried up by July 1st, and I don't know what next year will bring for grant money. Again, if I can do anything to offset a little bit of it going forward, I'll be more than happy to, but just because this was a surprise to all of us.
We may have to look into other solutions on that, Matt. Yep.
We are. The town administrator and I have been in talks with a couple different companies. Unfortunately, the only one I've received back is currently not interested in doing business with us as long as we have a contract with ABC. So I'm still waiting for some information back from the other company. I asked for a quote just to see where we stand in relation to what other companies could offer us price-wise for both solid waste and recycling, as well as transportation. Whatever I can do to bring some of the costs down going forward. It's not going to be something that can be done overnight. This will be a several-month process.
How long is our contract with ABC?
I was going to ask.
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
So when does it expire?
I'd have
8
to
years
get-
left or so.
We're about 3 years in, so another 7 years.
Do you know if there's maybe you don't know, but is there a clause in there where if costs escalate, we can get out of the contract and shop?
Correct. There is.
We have been in contact with legal in terms of our options. It's not something I necessarily want to get into particulars in
Okay.
an open meeting, since it has to do with contractual
Yeah,
obligations.
no, that's fine. He answered the
But
question.
yes, we have investigated different scenarios in which we can move in a different direction.
Excellent.
So we're exploring options, and you'll get back to us once you've gathered all
Yes.
that info?
Yeah,
Okay.
as Matt mentioned, we've reached out, through Matt, we've reached out to a couple of different haulers, a couple of different collection agencies. We are diligently working through this.
Okay.
We're gonna stick to the topic, though. We're not gonna go into
Sorry,
the reasons
Mr.
why, you know what I'm saying, Mike, right, at town meeting?
You're right.
Yes.
So we're gonna make sure we don't deviate and start hearing people say, I told you so from way back when, all right?
And it's, I'm just trying to
I hear you, brother. Just tell us what you gotta tell
move
us.
forward,
Yep.
I think we'll just want to remind the moderator of what
Yeah.
the
Please.
intention
Yes.
of the
The
article
article
is.
is-
We've had to do that before, and Sean's been excellent
Yep.
about that.
Yep. So where are we at Waterline? What's this for?
So the water line, as I'd stated prior, there is a leak somewhere in the water line from the meter pit to the building.
Oh,
Not
that's
sure
right, you
where.
said that.
The
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
line is in serious need of upgrade. It can't handle the modern water pressures. So the amount it will cost to fix the leak is going to be about the same as it will to replace the line. So that's actually the quote we have with the person we're going to have, or the company we're going to have do the installation.
Yep.
We can't do it until the ground thaws enough for them to do the digging, but that's an exact number there. And the water bill, that's just more than what we anticipate, just because we do have that leak, so the water bill is higher.
Now,
What
is
we
that
need.
water, is that anticipating that you're going to have lag time before you can actually replace it? Are you forecasting that you're going to continue to have high water bills and tacking on?
This is just to cover the lag that we've had in the increase in the bill.
Okay, but what about, so that's to date? And then from now until when the water line can be replaced? Are we looking
Should be
at
done
more?
in the next few weeks, as long
Okay.
as.
Soon as possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Unfortunately, they were scheduled to do it the week that we got the deep freeze, so that
Yeah.
was unfortunate. But the minute that they can get the shovel in the ground, they'll be doing it, so
Okay.
that should be pretty accurate. Septic and plumbing services, that was an emergency repair. Again, like the water line, it's maintenance at the transfer station that,
How do we make sure it doesn't happen again?
Exactly.
Well, it's copper now and you're replacing plastic, right?
yeah, well, what happened is we had a backup and,
Yeah, but 10 years, man,
It-
you know?
Dear God,
yeah, that's,
it's a long time.
it could have been longer than that.
Yeah.
You know, so now I have a record of it. It'll be on a schedule. Every couple of years, I'll have it pumped. And then in turn, what would have been a 200 and, I want to say it was $230 for the pumping, turned into 670 because the line froze. They had to come in with a steamer. You know, and just as far as employees, you have to provide a bathroom
Oh,
service. So
obviously, yeah, those guys are pretty
I,
much.
I outweighed
removed
the
there.
cost of a porta potty
Yeah.
and
Oh,
trying to let
geez.
that thaw.
Yeah,
And this was more financially,
feasible.
yeah.
No, we're lucky it's not more, I
Right.
guess.
And then prospectively, we're going to make sure that we're good stewards and keeping that
Maintenance, yes,
pumping on a go-forward basis.
absolutely.
Okay.
Matt, can I ask you a quick question, since you just said it was 10 years or longer? How long have you been the position you're at?
8 months.
9 months, 8 months?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this has nothing to do with you taking over?
I know, I'm just trying to,
Yeah,
I don't think, nobody on the, we didn't imply that.
No,
I think
I'm
it's just
just,
clarifying, so
I
that.
just wanted to
yeah,
clarify.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it seems, you know, when
Well,
one thing
plus,
goes,
you know,
everything
this-
goes, you know?
Yeah, plus there's only-
Water line and, you know,
Technically, there's usually only, what, 3 or 4 people up
That's
there?
correcting all the
right?
problems up
Yeah.
there.
You know? They're only open how many days a week, so you gotta figure out, it doesn't need to be done every year, I'm guessing, or does it?
no, I
Should be
think
done
probably
every
every
year?
3 to 4 years would be
Yeah.
certainly adequate, provided it's, you know, still 40 hours a week with, you know, we have 2 full-time employees and then a, you know, a part-time person that works
Yep,
additional, you know, 3 days a week, so. Just going forward and just trying to hopefully be able to maintain it
yeah.
a little better.
No, once a year is the right way to go, yeah.
Yeah, Advo Waste, this was a new service we started offering shortly before I started, I think it was in April, for sharps disposal. Most towns will offer it, it's good, that keeps, you know, sharps from going in the trash on the street. So fortunately, it was more popular than had been anticipated, so the $260 will be to cover the additional 2 pickups that I'm figuring we're probably gonna need between now and July 1st.
how many are people turning in? This is fascinating to me. I like that, you know, we would have such a response. Obviously, it's something we need.
I know,
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing,
Right.
Tracy.
Quite a
A lot of
Diabetics.
diabetics and,
Yeah.
by sharps, folks, he means needles, right?
Correct,
Obviously,
correct,
so
needles.
Yeah.
People
Yeah,
that may not know.
diabetics are certainly probably a.
Yeah, I don't
a
think you
top
met the deal that
user.
says, hey, let's go to the transfer station and drop off our
No.
needles.
Probably not, no.
We
No.
have to do the right thing.
Unfortunately, it's a hazardous waste, and a lot of companies, they'll provide the needles, but then they don't provide a way to dispose of them.
Yeah,
So residents are left hanging, and it's, you know,
It's
the
the
right
right
thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want the folks at the transfer station, you know, having stuff poking out of bags or whatever, and, you know.
And even the people
yeah.
at the, you know, facilities, you know, the end facilities, sorting through the trash
Right.
and like that.
Yeah.
So. The refrigerant recovery, gone over this as well. I know I've talked to Todd about this, and it's nickels and dimes, but it little bits add up. We're currently paying per pound to dispose of all electronics and things like the refrigerators, and it's getting extremely costly. So we looked into a different avenue, which I'll have a company come up, they'll remove the refrigerant for $8 a unit, and then we can dispose of it as regular scrap metal. It'll save quite a bit of money.
do they reuse it?
They'll recycle the metal.
Recycle it, whatever?
Yeah. Oh, the
For this-
refrigerant?
yeah.
That I'm not sure. They
They
may.
probably do.
Probably doing it is probably why,
Yeah.
it might be part of the cost too, I mean,
Could be, yeah.
Yeah,
But they come
okay.
right up, and they'll pull it right out of the units, and they'll tag it, and
not many people know that, I'm sure. What you just said, you know, I didn't know that, so.
I just found this out about a month ago, and they'll come up once we have about 25 units. So again, it's all a a rough estimate, but I'm anticipating about 50 units between now and July 1st. From what we already have existing, we'll probably take in.
Matt, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Do we charge the residents to bring an item up there?
We do.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get a
Trip tickets, right?
Yep, you have to get trip tickets, and again, it's all dependent on what the item is how much it'll cost.
We don't have the luxury of bringing it to work.
I don't I can bring it to work.
Mattresses will take, TVs, computers, anything with refrigerant, air conditioners, refrigerators, dehumidifiers, water coolers, tires, propane tanks.
And even though we charge the residents,
Oil.
there's still a shortfall in this particular area.
Right now is huge, yeah.
So, right now, currently, or prior to implementing this, were we selling these things for scrap, or?
No, we were paying per pound for them to be taken away.
But
and
now
then
we'll
dealt
have
with.
potential revenue from selling the scrap, right?
Very minimal amount, but yeah.
Okay, but it adds up, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it'll probably be close to a wash as
Yeah.
far as the recovery, but we'll actually get, a few dollars.
Wouldn't somebody who's dumping a refrigerator or an air conditioner benefit the town if they brought it up to,
Casoli's up
yeah,
there,
Casoli's? Well, they're gonna give you a couple bucks.
Except
for
they
it.
won't take it with the refrigerant either.
Correct.
So you have to empty it out first before
You have
you
to
take
have
it
a
there?
special,
Yeah.
there's a
From them?
special license.
Scrap yards generally won't take things with refrigerant. Like we deal with Spiegel scrap for
Yeah.
our scrap metal bin.
I thought they took it out there, but whatever, okay.
Yep, no, I talked to him about it
Yeah.
to see if he could do anything with us.
Yeah.
And he's actually the person who had put me in touch with this
I
company.
gotcha.
He said, well, if it was like 2 or 3 units every couple months, I could take them, and he has this company come to him to remove
Takes it,
refrigerant out of
yeah.
units before he can scrap them. So,
So he'll take them as long as they have the tag on it saying that it's been emptied.
correct. Yep, so this company will come slap a tag on it, says refrigerant's been removed, and put a giant orange, I guess, X on it. So it can't be confused. Then the last one is a pretty big hit, but it goes in line with what I was just talking about, the electronics waste, the e-waste disposal. We're gonna be really short this year. And again, we're charged per pound.
Yeah,
And we charge, and we have a range for sizes on TVs. Unfortunately, the really large, old projection TVs weigh a ton.
you still get those, yeah?
We do. We've been getting a lot lately.
Wow.
And that's really been driving the cost up, so
Doesn't
we're
William
short.
Hanson have a program where they take this for $20 or something?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're thinking about,
Yeah, dollars
yeah,
for skulls.
they do dollars for skulls, but they do it like 2 or 3 times a year,
Yeah.
and maybe people just don't want to wait, I
Wait,
don't know.
okay.
They take them
Yeah.
for free.
No, you
No, you pay,
Oh,
it's a
you pay them to
fundraiser for
take
them,
it.
for
Oh, I
the
see.
dollars for skulls, yeah.
it's like $20 or something, right?
Yeah.
But okay, Matt, these are
So-
things you can't, yeah, I hear you.
So that's about as close of a number as I can get for you. It may still be a few dollars off, but some of these are the best guess estimate, looking at last year's tonnages, what we've had to dispose of this year so far, and costs associated with them, so.
Well, I think it's an honest number, 41,869.
It's a little lower than what I had originally anticipated,
Yeah.
but a part of that, actually, most of that's because of the offsetting some of that recycling with the grant money.
And you'll be handing this out at town meeting, correct?
Yeah,
Right?
I talked to
It will help
Beth
immensely.
Sloan about it,
Yep.
and she said that would be a wise idea.
Yeah,
This is really good, Matt. This is what we were looking for.
That breaks it right down.
Yep.
Took me a little time to get it together,
yeah.
so.
Go check your
A lot of
facts.
numbers.
and the
Yeah,
numbers and-
a lot of just
yeah, a lot of
numbers to
information.
put together, and
I'm not gonna do it.
Are there any other questions for Matt on this? Are we looking to, I think we recommended.
Recommend.
We're looking to place and we've already
no, you've
placed it.
placed.
We're Looking to
Already placed it,
recommend it
yep.
for Article
Yes.
2. So I would entertain a motion to recommend Article 2 as described in the warrant.
Yes,
So moved.
motion.
Laura came in
Second.
Well, Laura gets, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Laura.
Kenny was looking at me and Laura snuck it right in.
Actually, Laura
Good for
B,
you,
Laura
Laura.
B is both in.
Sorry,
So
guys.
Laura got a second. So, thank you for this again, Matt. Much
Welcome.
appreciated.
If you have any other questions at any point between now and Monday night, feel free to give me a call or stop in.
Okay, we'll call the vote.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep, thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. 5-0, recommend. Article 2, no more. Do we, there's nothing else further to discuss. We've gone through the details in the past on Article 3. And again, the selectmen, I don't know if you've had time to read, but you did get, you should have gotten in your mail, the breakdown of the $555,095.13 repairs, changes to the schools. So, okay, Mary, am I to close the warrant? Are we looking to close it or no?
No, the warrant, we already closed the warrant. We closed the warrant the night we actually opened it. So we're all set. You just had that one recommendation.
Oh, you don't have to open it to
No, 'cause we had
recommend
already
to close.
placed
it.
so
No, no,
You don't have
no,
to.
you'd already placed
You don't have to
it.
open it to recommend it, I get you.
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out that Matt has inherited an awful lot of problems, and he has put an awful lot of effort in a very short amount of time in trying to solve those problems. Obviously, the most predominant, or the most obvious of which is, as we've been discussing over the past couple of weeks or so, the fact that the cost of recycling has gone up. But as I think Selectman Hickey alluded to, there were an awful lot of things that happened prior to his watch that has been thrown on his plate. And he is doing yeoman's work in terms of trying to, straighten the ship. And I just wanted to make sure that, I know the board is aware of that, but I want to make sure that people at home who are watching this are aware of the efforts, the Herculean efforts that I believe that he's been putting in, and needs to be recognized for such.
Oh, I think that's important. I mean, the level of detail, Matt, was very much appreciated. And, I know you apologized for how long it took, but this was an astounding amount of information to try to pull together and distill.
Get you
exact
numbers from the
last 3
months for
each line.
Yeah.
too.
So, no, you're right, you're absolutely right, Mike. We're very
Just stay
fortunate.
here, Matt.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll get better, hopefully, Matt, you know what I mean?
We're already invested in that, so you have to stay.
And we need the conservation.
We need him 2 times over.
You've got 2 hats there,
Yeah.
brother. So, yeah. Matt, as always, that's how, in general, how this board feels about you. You do well, and you too, Todd, and it goes to many of the people who put these numbers together, including Mary and Mike, so
Mary more so than me.
it's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to Town Administrator's Report, Mr. Mike McHugh.
It's going to be very short, Mr. Chairman, and after which I'm going to take my leave along with Todd and Matt and get up to, as I mentioned, to that FinCom meeting. Todd alluded to the cherry sheets, the monies that are coming in or the monies that are going out, at least at this juncture in terms of the governor's preliminary budget proposal. I wanted to mention that basically when we weigh what we're getting in and what we're paying out, the increases to both, it comes out to be about, Todd had mentioned that what's coming in is about $38,000. However, what's going out also increased. So the overall increase, I believe, is going to be about $33,000. It's better than the opposite, but, and as far as the amount that we perceive that the schools will be getting in the Chapter 90, it comes out to be about $75,000. So it's more so to them, it's sort of a drop in the bucket. But again, at least it's more money, and we'll see where that goes as it goes through the machinations of the House and the Senate, and then the committees that reconcile all of that. So, one, make sure the board knew. And Todd had also mentioned out, in particular, we saw a decrease in the amount of money that we're getting in reimbursement for veterans' costs, and that is, there's been a significant drop over the last couple of years, I believe, in terms of cases. So. 3 other real quick things. We did get a correspondence back from Duxbury in regards to the regional dispatch. That cost was only, or what they had given back to us was basically our cost to enter into that agreement. The other piece of that equation is what we're going to potentially get from 911. We're putting together a meeting through Duxbury with 911 to see what sort of incentives they're going to give to the town. So when we get those numbers, I didn't feel it was appropriate to bring before the board at this point sort of half the equation.
Too early, yeah.
When we get those numbers, we will come before the board with the entire package and have the board make a decision on whether it wishes to move forward or not at that point. I had a very brief conversation with a vendor in terms of making improvements to town hall access. As you're probably aware, about a year or so ago, we did get a number of about $60,000 allocated to make improvements to security and access here at Town Hall.
Oh, card read access, that's right.
Yeah, or a fob, or there are different ways to go about it. I will, when I get more information, I'm also going to, in the next meeting that I have, I'm going to bring the police chief in to get his feel in terms of what is appropriate, what's not appropriate. And we will actually go into executive session to discuss that, because one of the open meeting exemptions is to discuss security. So obviously, it's not something I want to get too much detail. But I wanted to make the board aware of the fact that that's moving forward. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I did use my new statutory authority to declare that we were in a state to go into snow and ice deficit. There's no set number for that. It's just that we reached the point where we're exceeding we anticipate that we will exceed the amount that was budgeted at town meeting. And again, Todd mentioned some of those sort of things in his presentation. So I have made that declaration. I've passed that on to the FinCom. I pass it on to you now, and I've made sure that the highway surveyor, who also kind of tuned us into the fact that they were touching upon that threshold, I've made him aware of it as well. And that's all I really have.
This, today's storm, I think, took a lot of people by surprise,
Yeah.
It
Look at
definitely
time,
was
it's
a
gonna be a
larger
dusting.
accumulation.
Yeah.
2 or 3 inches, and there was 7.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, for those updates. Appreciate them.
I have one quick question for
Kenny?
when we talk about the ambulance account. Have you had a chance to talk to the fire chief about the credit collections for the ambulance account?
We are discussing that in terms of going forward with a company.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we continue to discuss that. There's really only 1 or 2 companies that do that, but
Okay, excellent.
yes. And with that, again, I'll excuse myself and my 2 colleagues, and we'll
Absolutely.
be
It's
upstairs.
good to see that you and Todd are taking advantage of the Modernization Act.
Yes,
All right.
it's made things a little easier.
Thanks.
Next, we have our committee reports.
Thank you, guys, take care.
Yeah,
Good night.
give them our best, will you?
Those some nice changes.
I shall.
Positive things.
Yes.
Yeah, no pressure, because what's standing between you guys getting out of here and now is the
Committee reports.
committee reports, right? So
Laura Kimmel, on the
I'm sure you want me to
200th
give a
anniversary.
fully exhaustive,
Yeah.
detailed report of.
Have we met?
We actually did meet last week. It was an excellent meeting. Marcus Lynn, who's the chair, has done a great job of filling the group out. We've got a lot of plans. I think it might be nice, maybe we could, if you will,
him come in?
Mr. Chairman, have him come in and he can give us a little, in a nutshell, some of the events that they're planning and.
Who's that, Laura?
Marcus Lynn.
Okay.
He's quite excellent, and really the strategy is going to be to try to involve all different ages. The fire department, we're asking them to have a ball. He's got, I mean, the ideas are just amazing. Pretty much put your life on hold for 2020 because you will have no time to do anything else but 200th anniversary celebrations. But it will be a lot of fun stuff. Geocaching for the kids and, dances and, yeah. So, but I think it would be great if we could have him come in and maybe a couple other members and they could update you because I don't want to just be the only one telling you guys what's going on.
That's a great idea. We'll do that. So Hanson will be hopping in 2020.
Yep.
Okay. Monpont Pond Committee, Mr. Howard.
That meeting was the 18th, and it was rescheduled for February 1st at 10 o'clock at the Halifax Town Hall.
Thank you very much, Donnie. And Laura, on the McQuon School reuse, I'm sorry, I was supposed to go last
Oh,
Thursday.
no worries. We had a productive meeting. We had an appraiser come, and he basically told us the building is viable in terms of potentially being something that we could sell, so that was good to know, in case that's the route we decide to go collectively. The other thing we're looking at is, could it be reused, and what could it be? At this point, the path that we're really gonna explore is senior housing.
Okay.
That seems like it would be a compatible use there, given the location. We want to be really careful because it's near the school and it's near the library. So some of the questions around that are, do we need to involve the housing authority, or do we want that to be a third party that's doing that? So we've got to get some conversations going with the housing authority. It's becoming abundantly clear that my delusional goal of having this on the May town meeting may not happen, because there's a lot here. But I'm gonna keep, trying. We're gonna keep, turning over all these rocks, and we'll see what happens. But there was some good dialogue. Our building inspector was here. He really gave us a lot of information, and fully subscribed to the potential use of that building as senior housing, given the constraints that he's aware of. So that was good to have him there.
Was Ernie? Ernie?
Pardon?
Was-
No, Ernie wasn't there.
No.
Ernie had taken us on a tour the last meeting that we
Yeah.
had, and what we had was the huge analysis that had been done by the committee that studied the schools,
Right.
and, so that was a little light reading that we had kind of all gone through. Bob walked us through what's going to trigger the school needing to be brought into compliance with ADA and fire. One of the things we want to explore is potentially, because this may take some time to get to the point where we are actually seeing if we want to do senior housing and having conversations with the right people, can we keep that ball in play and try to keep the school in use as a school, maybe talking to an entity to see if they want to continue renting it, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So we've got to kind of think about how we can be agile while we're looking at all these different options. So that's my, in a nutshell, report on that.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay.
Again, just a reminder to folks out there, please don't forget our town meeting, special town meeting, February 5th at 7:30 PM, Hanson Middle School. Please make sure you attend. I think that's pretty much
Bring
it.
somebody with you.
Yeah, bring
We
a,
need,
Make
yeah,
sure
bring a
they're-
friend.
Make sure they're a
Yeah.
registered
Maybe
voter.
two.
bring a registered voter.
Bring a
please.
friend or an enemy.
That's
If you
about,
don't, we'll be calling you.
yeah, yeah. That's about all I have, unless we're moving on to
Motion to
adjournment.
adjourn?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded in reverse order, Mary. All those in favor say aye. Aye. 5-0, we're adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
How'd I do, Kenny?
Excellent.